on or talk about, just please stop me. I'll try to remember to pause after everyone. And same thing, Superintendent. I see you have staff members here as well, so if there are items that you'd like to speak to, please just let me know, okay?
Thank you.
All right, so we'll go ahead and start moving through the agenda item. 1.1 is called to order. 2.1 would be changes to the agenda, and there are some changes, so let me just read over those. 2.1, consent agenda, added item 8.33, agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office for the Choice Information Technology Institute CSI program at Crestview High School for the 2019-2020 school year. Discussion agenda, deleted item 10.1, authorization to direct the school board attorney to draft a school board resolution to forward to the Okaloosa County Commissioners for a referendum to be added to the March 2020 presidential preference primary election ballot on changing the selection method of the Okaloosa County Superintendent of Schools at the request of Dr. White. And colleagues, let me just say now, I apologize for missing the last school board meeting. I think that's the first one that I had to miss since you honored me with this position 3 years ago. But in any case, I thought at one time it would be a good time, this meeting, to resurrect this idea, but after I studied this agenda a lot closer Tuesday evening, I decided that probably be better to talk about that some other time. Okay? All right, so and then 3.1, recognition of Sharon Dooley, Northwest Florida Daily News education columnist, for her outstanding support of Okaloosa County schools through the Northwest Florida Daily News School Scoops column presented by Superintendent Chambers.
Dr. White.
Yes, sir.
I see that Mr. McLaughlin's in the audience today, but I just wanted to just say thank you to the Northwest Florida Daily News for all the great articles that the principal scoops that have come out over the last week. So that's been a really great thing for principals to be able to talk about their schools, and especially the newer principals that have been appointed since the beginning of the end of the school year. So thank you to the Northwest Florida Daily News for doing that.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bryant. All right, so that takes us through our changes, and let's go ahead now and move to Section 3, recognitions. 3.1, recognition of Sharon Dooley, Northwest Florida Daily News education columnist, for her outstanding support of Okaloosa County schools through the Northwest Florida Daily News School Scoops column presented by Superintendent Chambers. 3.2, recognition of Twin Cities Hospital and Fort Walton Beach Medical Center in support of student safety for their generous donations of Stop the Bleed kits to the Okaloosa County high schools presented by the superintendent. Then moving on to visitors, this is a formal request to be on the agenda. 4.1, Patrick Ryan, Peggy Mitchell, and Samantha Lambert on behalf of Yes for Okaloosa Schools referendum on changing the selection method of the Okaloosa County Superintendent of Schools from elected to appointed. Then on Section 5, administrative personnel appointments, there are several. 5.1 is the appointment of Program Director of Facilities and Plant Planning recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 5.2, appointment of Program Director, Exceptional Student Education recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 5.3, appointment of Assistant Principal 1 at Baker School recommended by the Superintendent for approval. And then 5.4, appointment of Assistant Principal 2 at Plough Elementary School recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Section 6, 6.1 will be public comment. Members of the public desiring to address the school board. Section 7, committee and staff reports, workshop only. 7.1, in-county travel paid for the period of July 4 through 24th, 2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. 7.2, out-of-county travel paid for the period of July 4th through the July 24th, 2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. Consent agenda, 8.1 will be the approval. And here we go, 8.2. Approval of the minutes of the budget workshop meeting of July 15, 2019, minutes of the special meeting of July 18, 2019, minutes of the workshop meeting of July 18, 2019, minutes of the special workshop meeting of July 18, 2019, minutes of the regular meeting of July 22nd, 2019, minutes of the special meeting public hearing of July 30, 2019, all recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.3, appropriation of District 2 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Mary Esther Elementary School for painting of doors in the amount of $8,000, presented by Mr. Dewey Destin and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. That's $20 so far today. 8.4, appropriation of District 1 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Pryor Middle School for 14 cafeteria tables in the amount of $12,495, presented by Lamar White and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.5, appropriation of District 1 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Meigs Middle School for ESE Physical Movement Room equipment in the amount of $3,858.99, presented by Lamar White and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.6, appropriation of District 1 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Longwood Elementary School for a classroom carpet in the amount of $10,000, presented by Lamar White and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.7, appropriation of District 3 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Longwood Elementary School for classroom carpet in the amount of $8,500, presented by Mrs. Linda Vanchek and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.8, budget amendment number 10, fiscal year 2018-2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.9, monthly financial statement for June 2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.10, invoices to be approved for payment, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.11, school donations, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.12, RFQ 20-08, install and rekey locks at Edge Elementary School, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.13, tag-on bid 17-F-226 ramp systems and stair systems, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.14, tag-on bid ITB MTS-906BC, playgrounds and related equipment, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.15, tag-on bid purchases over $25,000, Playmore, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.16, amendment to award ITB 18-20 locksmith services, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.17, exempted purchase over $25,000, Brain Pop, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.18, exempted purchase over $25,000, Voyager Sulphurous Learning, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.19, exempted purchase over $25,000, Imagine Learning, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.20, exempted purchase over $25,000, Teachtown Incorporated, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.21, employee benefit renewals for the 2020 plan year, presented by Mr. Russ Frakes, Specialist, Risk Management, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Okay, Mr. Frakes, please come forward. Superintendent. All right. Welcome. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. We are presenting today the renewal of the Employee Benefits Program for the 2020 plan year, probably earlier than we've done it in recent memory. So we're excited about that. Happy that things have fallen into place. As you can see from the summary that we've put together, it's pretty, the plan is fairly static. We're in the process of multi-year, still enjoying those multi-year rate guarantees that we have in place. So everything with the exception of our medical insurance will remain as it has been in the past. There was a 5.5% increase with our medical coverage with United Healthcare. Good, and especially in light of our claims experience has been improving, and we've had a good year this year. Part of that renewal is even due to, that increase is due to Affordable Care Act fees that are associated. They're going to be passed on to the employer by the carriers. That amounts to about 2.65% of that 5.5. So based on the balance of 2.85 would be due to experience. So we've had a really good year as far as that goes. So we want to continue that. We've been working with United Healthcare and our brokers at FBMC to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to get, and it comes down to communication. So we're going to be doing some new things this year, try to expand and enhance our communications with our employees to get information in their hands, and hope that everyone continues to do the right things, and that we can continue this claims experience and hopefully control costs in doing so.
Mr. Frakes, that almost sounds like some kind of record. 5%
5
increase? I
5.5.
can't remember when the school district had an increase that low.
It's been some time since we went with United Healthcare initially that we had where we had a rate hold there, but a good experience, and it's borne out in the numbers that we see. So
Good job.
we're having fewer claims. The overall claims experience has improved, and we've had a good year again. So we just hope to be able to continue that.
Awesome.
All right. Any questions?
Comments, questions, board members, colleagues?
Very good.
Thank you.
Awesome.
folks. I appreciate
Good.
it.
Thank you. All right, so 8.22, Okaloosa School Bus Routes for the 2019-2020 school year, presented by Mr. Jay McInnes, Program Director of Transportation, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.23, Motor Vehicle Lease Agreement for Disaster Transportation Services between the School Board of Okaloosa County and Consulate Healthcare DBA Destin Healthcare and Rehabilitation Center, presented by Mr. Jay McInnes, Program Director of Transportation, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.24, Sale and Disposal of Surplus Property, presented by Mr. Steve Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.25, Carl D. Perkins Secondary Entitlement Grant for fiscal year 2019-2020, presented by Mrs. April Branscombe, Program Director of Career and Technical Education, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.26, Amended Agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and Okaloosa County Comprehensive Head Start, submitted by Mrs. Melody Summer, Program Director, Exceptional Student Education, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.27, Interinstitutional Early College Dual Enrollment Articulation Agreement between the Okaloosa County School District and Northwest Florida State College for 2019-2020, presented by Mrs. Cindy Gates, Director, Principal Evaluations and Special Projects, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.28, Affiliation Agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and 500 South Hospital Drive Operations, LLC, DBA, Shoal Creek Rehabilitation Center for the Practical Nursing Program at Okaloosa Technical Center and Choice High School, presented by Mr. Jeff Palmer, Director, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.29, School Alliance Agreement between Okaloosa Hospital Incorporated, DBA Twin Cities Hospital, and the School Board of Okaloosa County for the Practical Nursing Program at Okaloosa Technical College and Choice High School, presented by Mr. Jeff Palmer, Director, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.30, School Affiliation Agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County, Florida, and Fort Walton Beach Medical Center for the Practical Nursing Program at Okaloosa Technical College, presented by Mr. Jeff Palmer, Director, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.31, School Affiliation Agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and North Okaloosa Medical Center for the Practical Nursing Program at Okaloosa Technical Center and Choice High School, presented by Mr. Jeff Palmer, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Dr. White, if I could.
Yes, sir.
You know, the last 4 that we just did, this just shows the commitment that we have with those students who are taking those programs in the high school and the technical school with our hospitals, so they can get basically on-the-job experience by going into those facilities. So we appreciate all the medical facilities that are working with our choice program and our technical programs, the nursing programs.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bryant. All right, so moving on to 8.32, Crestview High School's request for course adoptions for the 2019-2020 school year, presented by Denise Berry, Specialist Curriculum Instruction, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. Excuse me, yes, sir.
And again, this is another course that we're offering, sculpture, at Crestview High School. Again, these are just courses that you don't normally would see in regular schools. So, you know, again, thank you for getting these programs in there for those students that might have that talent in sculpting, you know. So.
Very good. All right, so moving on to 8.33, agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office for the Choice Information Technology Institute CSI program at Crestview High School for the 2019-2020 school year, presented by Principal Dexter Day, Crestview High School, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
One last time,
Sure,
again.
sure.
This is another program that we used to have at one time. We're bringing it back. CSI training at the high school for students who might be interested in that program. You know, back early in the early decades, CSI was very popular on TV, still is, I believe. And, you know, this opens up an opportunity for these students to find that niche that they might have in law enforcement. So again, thank you to the Sheriff's Department and Mr. Day for working to get this program going again. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. All right, colleagues, so that takes us through the consent items, and moving on to Superintendent's Human Resources recommendations. 9.1, employees on administrative leave, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources. 9.2, deferred retirement option program, DROP, presented by Lee Hale, Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources. 9.3, addendum to the master contract between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the Okaloosa County Education Association, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 9.4, addendum to the master contract between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the Okaloosa Education Staff Professionals, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
And Dr. White,
Yes, sir.
if you don't mind, I'd like
Sure.
to have Dr. Hale come up and just
Sure.
say a couple words.
All right, sure. Good morning, Dr. Hale.
Good morning, Chairman, board members, Superintendent. I just wanted to take this opportunity publicly to say how good the negotiations went this year with the 2 unions that we are partnering with. We both had a very collaborative idea to get this done so that we could start the year with teachers knowing exactly where they stood. And we had very like-minded emphases while we were in there, and it was just a very good experience, and I felt like it would be good for you guys to know that. And to the superintendent, I would also like for you to say that your intention that we get this settled as quickly as we could for the benefit of the teachers so that they can concentrate on instruction in the classroom was met by both sides. So I would just like to say that to everyone today. So
Appreciate it.
Well, and I'll just add, this might be another record.
Well, fortunately, we didn't have a whole lot to talk about, so since we had just completed the others
Right.
just a
Well-
few months prior. But it was a very collaborative effort, and it's my honor to work with those guys. They're very much
Well,
professionals.
Dr. Hale, I well remember that often in the past, contracts were not settled until sometimes the year was almost over. So congratulations, and also to the association.
And I can speak for my team. We had a very collaborative and like-minded group as well, and I know that the unions did as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, so then moving on to 9.5, proposed fiscal year 2019-2020 salary schedules for administrative, managerial, professional, technical, and temporary personnel, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.6, cleared certification requirements and issuance of contracts for the 2019-2020 school year, presented by Mrs. Karen Peak, Program Director of Professional Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.7, out-of-field report for the 2018-2019 school year, presented by Mrs. Karen Peak, Program Director of Professional Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.8, authorization for payment of back pay and accrued benefits, including reimbursement of health insurance premiums, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval pursuant to Section 111.05 Florida statutes.
Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr.
Just in support of transparency.
Absolutely.
This is for Superintendent Jackson, I take it.
Yes, sir.
And I noticed, or at least I cannot find a number about exactly what it is we're paying. Rita, do you have a number?
Ms. Gowan, thank you for coming forward.
Yes, sir. The number was in the executive section of the agenda item, and the amount is 70,000. Hold on, 70,000. I think it's 70,986.
And 13 cents.
70,986 and 13 cents is the gross amount.
Now, this is the amount we would have paid Superintendent Jackson had she been on the job anyway, right? So it doesn't have a big impact on the budget?
That's correct. The money was budgeted and appropriated, so therefore, it was already in place, and that's what that position would have earned had they remained in that position.
Okay, so the only net effect on the budget would be what we paid for our second superintendent during the same time period.
That's correct.
And that was how much? Do you have any rough estimate?
I don't know right off. I would guess 50, 60,000.
Yeah, that's about what my rough guess was. So it's not nearly as big a bite as it would have been.
No, sir, and remember that this was all driven by the state and not anything locally, and not anything
That's an
that,
important part of it, isn't it?
right.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, sir, and I would just say that last part might deserve some emphasis, that this was not an action of this school board. This was an action by the executive branch of government, by the governor. And of course, upon reinstatement, Mr. McInnes, I think that there may be some legal requirements upon this school board because the governor reinstated this superintendent. Could you speak just for a moment about this particular Florida statute?
Yes,
and what
sir.
it requires?
The governor did reinstate former Superintendent Jackson under Executive Order 19-166. In that same order, he revoked the original executive order that suspended her. There is a Florida statute that addresses the ability for elected officials who are reinstated after suspension. The matter was never acted on by the state Senate. There's a separate statute that would have addressed those reimbursements there, but it was not acted on by the Senate because of the governor's order. Therefore, under the other statute, the elected official is entitled to receive back pay and benefits that would have otherwise been paid. And the agency under whose budget those amounts were allocated is the agency that makes that payment. And so that's what's in front of you
Yes, sir.
for consideration.
Questions or comments, colleagues? No. Ready to move forward? Looks pretty cut and dry to me, based upon the law. All right. Moving forward then, 9.9, personnel recommendations presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Yes, sir.
Dr. White, I do have a question for Mr. Chambers, and I apologize, I didn't prepare you for this. Just curious, how are we looking as far as our teacher positions going into the beginning of the school year?
So we have some information for you. You know, each week during senior staff, we discuss those specifically. We had some specific numbers on Tuesday, but Dr. Hale, you may have more specific numbers today on Thursday.
Good morning again. I do have current information as of this morning with regard to our active positions that remain. We have 5 classroom instructional positions across the county that still remain active in the I guess,
Oasis.
Oasis system, gathering applications and interviews and things like that. There are several more that are in the inactive position on Oasis, which means it's in some other position other than just active advertisement. It was pulled down for a reason, so either the principal's working with someone or the allocation was pulled back or something else like that. So there's 5 classroom instructional positions that are out there right now. There are 8 classroom assistants that are still out there of a lot of different variations. Some are standard paras, some are ESE related, some are one-on-ones, but there's 8 total there. We still have 5 speech pathologists that are active advertisements right now, 2 school psychologists, and that's the instructional piece. We have several that are associated with ed support. Most of them seem to be part-time positions like lunchroom monitor and things like that, but we do have in some cleaner positions. There are some custodial. There are some associated with the transportation department, various bus drivers, classroom assistants, and things like this. But to date, we've hired over 200 people this summer, and with 5 instructional positions left and the kind of niche ones left, it's been a really successful year. I'm proud of all the work that's been going on over there.
Yeah, I would agree, 5, even though we still have 5, we got to get them filled. But the state of Florida last year, for the entire year, I believe it was over 2,000 teaching positions that were never filled last year. So kudos to our district for really working hard. I know Teach at the Beach really sparked some interest. So
And our principals are very creative too. I found that out this summer. They're doing a good job of finding the right people and figuring out ways to get them in.
And
so.
I told you that when we did Teach at the Beach, it was kind of like an NFL draft, and after it's all over with, it's interesting how all that work plays out. So.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I've lost a few based upon some of that creativity.
I think we all have, but I think we're all a party to the other side of that as well too. So.
And I just say this, Dr. Hale, some of our neighboring school districts are not nearly so fortunate that we only have 5. They have quite a few more.
I agree with that. And just while I'm here, I'd like to also say that I have gotten a lot of individual communications from various leaders across the district, principals especially, giving specific kudos to our department with the efficiency improvements that they've made and their attitudes with getting some of these very, very difficult situations handled. So I mean, again, I just like to give a shout out to my people over there in HR. So.
All right, anything else?
And Dr. Watt, if you don't mind if I add,
Sure.
so you may recall approximately a couple weeks ago, we were in the double digits on instructional and ed support to the tune of about 20-something
Wow.
positions in instructional, 50-something positions in ed support. So I also want to reiterate the great job that HR has done, but they've gone an extra step this year. They've gone out to Indeed and really put some positions out there, and I actually believe we got a speech and language pathologist from that process. So our hard to fill areas, we're trying to get more aggressive and go out there to different venues in order to attract and get some people here in Okaloosa County. So I'm very proud of the work that your department has done.
Thank you.
And I'm very grateful too. I know that the board is too, because I remember there's not much worse than starting a year without the teacher in the classroom.
Substitute.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have
I
a
also
quick
think,
question.
oh, I'm
too.
sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
I also think, kind of connecting a dot, that getting the negotiations done and having that in place may have helped in that situation too, when people can see what's going on with that and everything, so.
And I appreciate that, because some of the things that we were able to do through the contract negotiations this year not only was able to get the contract settled earlier, but also make our jobs that much more attractive for new hires.
Right.
And so that's continuing to be a work in progress, but I do appreciate that acknowledgement, because I agree.
One quick question. I know I've asked you this before, but in case someone listening knows someone moving into the area, of the 5 instructional positions, are they mostly high school, secondary content, or are they mostly elementary?
I can tell you what they are exactly.
Okay,
We have a
perfect.
second grade position advertised at Bob Sykes Elementary.
That's a big one.
I did.
We have a reading senior high teaching position at Crestview. We have a digital information technology education position at Pryor Middle School. We have a VE teacher position at Richburg, and a preschool handicap teaching position at Southside.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
All right.
Just have one question.
Yes, sir. Mr. Bryant?
Mr. Chambers, thank you very much, and it was good to see that Dr. Hale had all that information. I was afraid I didn't want to put you on the spot there, but Dr. Hale, thank you for having all that information ready to go.
I have learned a lot in the last.
What else can they ask?
Well, usually it's customary when we're going to ask a question, we do prepare staff for that, so they will have the answer. But on this particular one, I appreciate having that ready. So.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Very good. All right, so moving on now to 9.10. Employment separations presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Any commentary or any questions here? Well, I guess I do. I think, is this the item where we have an agreement?
Yes, sir.
All right. And so there's an agreement with a, I guess appropriately called a former employee. And I think, being a layperson, I don't always understand the legalities associated with such agreements. And so I just have a couple of questions. And so Mr. McInnes, I don't know who else to direct these questions to except you, as you are our school board attorney. Could you just briefly describe this legal agreement and what it is and how
Yes,
it was
sir.
done? I don't believe you were the one that wrote this agreement.
Correct.
All right.
The attorneys representing the employee and representing the superintendent and district in the matter, because it was a pending administrative proceeding before this board, negotiated a resolution to the matter to bring the case to settlement. The agreement sets forth the terms and conditions of that settlement, including the consideration being paid, all of the claims and releases that are included there to protect the school district and the school board. That is a customary way in which those matters are resolved if they can negotiate settlements and resolutions. So that's what's before you for approval on this agenda item.
So in your experience as our school board attorney, have we had these kind of things before?
Yes, sir. In other employment matters, when we reach settlement or resolution, we use these similar general mutual release of agreements to be sure that the district and the school board are protected as they are agreeing to make some type of compensation for the agreement of the former employee to release claims.
Yes, sir. And in lieu of having such an agreement, what could potentially happen?
The legal proceedings would continue, and the costs would continue to be incurred, and you would end up with some results sooner or later. Many times the administrative proceeding will result in further legal action after that, and so this brings all of that to a conclusion with a known outcome.
Any questions or comments?
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Chairman, and I appreciate you bringing it up so that we understand what's going on. And it's a question that I had asked a number of months back. This item is tucked in with 10 or 12 other actions. So should any one of us want to vote no, or how do you do that when it's tucked in with all these
Good question.
other actions?
Don't we vote on them separately anyway?
Well,
No,
it's
sir, not
on
this
the,
way.
it's on the agenda under separations, as is customary. If there were an item that you did not want to vote on, I think you could simply just split the separations report out and pull an item out separately.
We could. And I'm a little confused about the customary. Usually this is a legal matter that would be under your portion, because basically it looks like it's a settlement. And so how did we come to the determination that it should be under this heading rather than over under the legal heading?
Because there was not a civil action in place that was being defended. This was an employment action that was in front of the board as an administrative matter, and the resolution is more in the nature of a separation of employment. A contract had expired, and that's why it's put under the personnel report.
Well, as I say, it makes it more difficult to, first of all, find it, and secondly, to separate it out, should you want to vote differently on any one of these 10 or 12 or whatever it's lumped together with. So.
And I agree with that, Mr. Destin. In fact, that has occurred in the past at this school board, not with this current school board or even a recent school board, but it's happened before.
It has.
And so I'm wondering, is it possible to separate these items out then? I mean,
The entire report?
Well, it would be pretty complex to have to vote on each individual one, but perhaps we can figure a way that when
Separate.
something is
Agreement or a settlement
right,
be different.
yeah. And you're right, it did happen, because I questioned it once before about how can you vote for a big group if you
Okay.
don't agree with one of the
Yes, sir.
transfers or one of the
Well, actually,
issues.
the one that I'm referring to, sir, was long, long ago, and it pertained to administrative contracts, and there was one that a board member didn't want to vote for, but he had to vote against the entire package.
That's exactly
remember
right.
that.
And
Caused
that's
an-
unfortunate. So,
caused an issue.
so I don't know if there's a way to divide this particular item out from all the others before Monday night's meeting, but I think I'm trying to support what you're
Well-
saying.
Well, I'm not so concerned with that, just because we now have aired what's going
Okay.
on and what it's all about.
All right.
But in the future, it would be good if something is going to be controversial,
All right.
or however we want to call it, to have some mechanism where you don't have to either vote against everybody or separate it out. And there is a mechanism. One of us could request that this be voted on separately.
Yes, sir.
So
All right, all right. So then that might occur then Monday night?
it could.
All right, all right. As opposed to going in and modifying the agenda, is what you're suggesting.
Okay.
Because
Good with
remember,
that?
this is not a consent agenda item, so it is,
No.
it is here for discussion, so you have that
Sure.
ability.
Sure.
Well, in a sense, when it's lumped together with half a dozen or so many more items, it is a consent. It makes it very difficult, but
Right.
we can address it.
Okay, good. All right, everybody clear on that? Okay, then. Anything else on this particular item? All right. 9.11. Employee transfers presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.12. Employee suspension presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. And colleagues, I would just suggest that if you haven't had an opportunity to review that investigative report, that you do so, all right? 9.13, reinstatement, reimbursement of sick leave due to line-of-duty illness, injury, medical examination presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.14, leave without pay presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Discussion agenda 10.1 deleted, authorization to direct the school board attorney to draft a school board resolution to forward to the Okaloosa County Commissioners for a referendum to be added to the March 2020 presidential preference primary election ballot on changing the selection method of the Okaloosa County Superintendent of Schools presented by Lamar White. 10.2, we don't yet know if there may be others. And then moving on to section 11, construction program owners, representatives, business status report. Mr. Destin.
Well, as you know, we have been working diligently on the stadium at Choctaw. We've gotten the inspection report from the firm we hired to do that, and hopefully we will have some concrete answers at the beginning of next week.
Play on
As you
words.
can
Good
see-
choice of words.
Concrete
Yep.
answers.
And as you can see, we are authorizing a set amount to go forward and start.
Yes, sir.
I would love to think that that will be enough, but probably not. And so we will address that once we have the direction that we've gotten from the inspections and the construction management people and the other engineers involved in it.
And sir, I had a citizen in the community talk to me about this and said if that doesn't demonstrate the aged nature of our facilities, nothing else will. I mean, when we start to have, I don't know how to say it, serious and hazardous situations and concrete structures because of age, it's pretty much shows the problems that we face.
And we certainly have a lot of them, because that is not our oldest structure by any means.
That's right.
We anticipate that there will be some folks doing something before the end of next week
All right.
for the repair of this. So
Yes, sir. I know they have some ambitious goals,
yes, they do.
and
And-
hoping that they can realize those.
They're still saying they think they can.
All right.
So we will find out before the end of next week, I would think.
Are you still hoping that the facility will be able to use for that first home football game,
That's
September 6th?
certainly still the goal, and they're still saying, we think we can do it.
Okay,
So,
great.
But we will know a lot better and a lot clearer by the end of next week.
Okay.
If we actually get people over there working, then we'll
Okay.
have a time schedule and we'll know what we're doing. And
I've seen big equipment there, but I'm not, it looks great because they got to pressure wash it. It looks really,
And the
Yeah,
object
yeah,
of that
pretty.
was for the inspections to get the layer off so we can really
see the problem, yeah.
And Mr. Horton and Dr. Smith have been working diligently on this, and I want
Mhm.
to thank them for their
Yeah.
efforts.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Destin, good job again.
That covers
Thank you.
it.
Yes, sir. All right, 11.2, Program Number 6, Task Order Number 5, Time and Materials Task Order, Emergency Remedial Efforts, both design and construction for repairs to the Joe Etheridge Stadium at Choctawhatchee High School, presented by Dr. Bill Smith, Specialist Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Information Technology Seat Management Contract, no business. Mr. Attorney, your business, sir.
No report today.
Thank you. Superintendent.
So as you know, it's a busy time of the year.
Oh,
I, just like many of you, we've been out to the schools, seeing the start of school efforts. One of the things I'm very proud of the fact is that our principals are taking the time to really recognize our teachers and recognize our staff for the great work that they did, not only preparing for this upcoming school year, but also the work that they did this past year. And I think that's not to go unrecognized. But what schools are also doing right now, you'll see a lot of mandatory reporting. That training is being done and documented at every school site, every employee. And there's also a lot of safety discussions that are happening at our schools today.
I bet. I hope so. Good.
Today started out very early for me this morning. I was able to go to Pensacola and talk with Channel 3 about back to school. And from there went to Davidson Middle School. Mr. Sanders, doing a great job over there, but it's always great to get out and talk to all the faculties. This upcoming Thursday, we are going to have the Commissioner of Education. He's going to be here in Okaloosa County. He's going to come visit with us and then visit at least one school. So that's going to be an exciting time to have the Commissioner of Education here in Okaloosa County and standing beside us and go to some schools. So excited about that. And just would like to say to our families out there with the start of school, as you know, there'll be a lot of traffic on the road, so just being careful, being vigilant. Our students will be back on the road early in the morning, my daughter being one of them. So just really paying attention and looking out for our kids at the bus stops as well. So we are excited about a great start to the school year so far. There's a lot of energy and excitement in the air, and I couldn't be more excited myself.
Very good. Thank you, sir. All right, so now we move to school board member announcements. Mr. Destin, do you have anything, sir?
I don't have anything. I did want to ask a question, though. When I asked Rita earlier about the amounts on Ms. Jackson, she said it was an executive content, and it was. I've gotten a query or a complaint, whatever you want to call it, from a constituent who wants to know why the general public doesn't see executive content. I suppose if they requested under information request that they would get it. But what is the reason that we have things in executive comment, and this may be directed toward Mr. McGinnis, that the general public can't or doesn't see without special permission or special request? And that is a question for Mr. McGinnis, I suppose, or it's just the way we've always done it. There must be a reason behind it, right?
Yes, sir. It's been a standard part of this agenda process. There are, at times, there may be material coming to the board as backup for something that's on the agenda, keeping in mind that the agenda item and the public content are always out there. Executive content may have a report or a piece of information in some cases that might not be necessarily a public matter, like if you had say for instance a payroll issue and you had some deduction numbers and things like that we would not otherwise disclose. The board may need to have that information, but it may not necessarily be something that even out of records we would disclose. So it's put on there so you've got it all together. I'm not saying that's the case in every situation. And then at times it may be put there as backup material for your consideration prior to the decision in a board meeting. So that it's used for those different matters.
Well, I understand the first context. The second one, though, is we're trying to achieve some transparency and regain the confidence of the public. And when they say, well, you guys have information that we're not allowed to see, it makes it a little hard to do that, and you're basing your decisions on something that we don't know anything about. So I don't know the solution to that. The information you're talking about, I understand lawfully we cannot make some of that public. And perhaps we just need to refine the way we're doing the executive summaries and make sure that stuff doesn't go in, but the other stuff perhaps could. Because it's hard, when they call me and say, and I hate to repeat myself, but you're making decisions based on information that we don't have. So.
Well, I appreciate the comment, and I certainly think that's something worthy of consideration, and let me assure you that that will be something that we'll be dealing with, at least in terms of that agenda meeting. And I think your point's well taken.
We can do a better job than we're doing.
I agree.
Thanks.
Yes, sir. All right, Mr. Bryant.
Just a quick thank you to everybody in the school district for just all their hard work and efforts over the summer. I always say that the first day of school is going to come, it's going to happen, and we just are going to hold on and ride the ride. But I'm really excited about the upcoming school year. Just a lot of great things happening in the schools. It's just a great time for our school district. And on another hand, I would like to take this moment to apologize to one of my school board members. And as you know, I was leading the meeting Monday night, and it was an honor to be called up from the bullpen to lead that meeting. But Dr. Kelly was doing her announcements, and she was recognizing some people in her community, and not trying to, to take away from her moment there. I made a comment just lightheartedly, but it did draw some laughs from the crowd. And I thought about it afterwards and thought, the comment, even though it wasn't meant to be mean or anything like that, you were doing your part to recognize people in your community. And, I wanted to take a moment just to apologize for making the lighthearted comment, not
I
mean.
didn't think a thing about that. I certainly appreciate your heart in that comment, but
Well,
really, I didn't think a thing about it after it was done.
And I know, and I
Thank you.
did apologize afterward, but I
did,
felt
and
it
it
was
was fine. It was
also
fine.
necessary to say it
Oh,
publicly.
thank you.
Because when we do make our announcements, we're really proud of who we represent and who's involved. And, so I do apologize for that.
It was just fine.
And just
It was a
one-
true statement. Even though it was funny, it was
It
a true
was,
statement, so
but-
it was all
but when you
good.
draw, but
All good.
when you draw that from the crowd, though, that's,
it's fine.
to me, it was just not
It was
worthy,
fine.
so.
Thank you, though.
And then one other quick one, I'm glad, that we talked about it, that you mentioned it earlier, but the mayor of Crestview, J.B. Whidden, I just want to say thank you to him. He was actually at Cram the Van for Shoal River last week, and he has also been very instrumental in helping with some of our traffic issues in Crestview. For those that go to Walker, you know how bad that situation has been. I had already planned on being there Monday afternoon to observe the pickup process, and I invited Mr. the mayor, to come out. So he said at this time he would probably come out and see how everything is progressing. But, kudos to our mayor in Crestview for helping get things done, and for also being active in helping with Cram the Van.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Dr. Kelly.
Oh, well, I would just like to thank the staff members and Mr. Bryant and Mr. Chambers, who attended Crestview's community back-to-school event. I think it was called Education Success Matters, and Steve Chapman, who put that together, a former student of mine. Have to brag a little bit about our North County people. So I think it was a very successful event. They gave away school supplies, and pizza and lots of good information to those parents and students who attended, and they achieved their goal, I think. So, great event there. And I think along with some of the rest of us, I've visited about 10 schools this week, and I just want to say to our principals, there was not a single principal who wasn't leading a faculty meeting or workshop regarding their data. They were already looking into peeling back that onion as to how they can improve this year going forward, or safety, or some other very important agenda item for that school going forward. So kudos to all of our school leaders. And just a reminder that on August the 15th at 6 p.m., the Niceville area community will hold their Niceville Strong event at the auditorium, where they gather in prayer to try to protect our schools and our community against addiction, mental health issues, and violence for the year going forward. So I think that's a very important event. I think last year they had over 300 people there, so good event to remember.
Very good, Dr. Kelly. Thank you. Ms. Evanche?
Yep, well, I've been out there too, it's great, and let me tell you this, the facilities look phenomenal. These custodial groups, they work so hard. I mean, they're really making things shine that you didn't think could shine again, because they're older. I mean, just gorgeous. So the buildings look great. I've been through and I've been welcomed when I've gone into schools, and people are working really hard, and it's so great to see so many working together for this one effort for the best of our students. So a shout out to all those schools and everyone who's working so hard. I've also been going to schools as this board elected me to be the representative for our Okaloosa Public Schools Foundation, and we've been going out and presenting our program to faculties so that people understand what our foundation is doing. We're working strong and got a lot of things going with our Take Stock in Children and other things. So I've been out there talking with them. Our employees contribute a lot to the foundation financially and in other ways, and also the foundation has benefits for those teachers in many grants and other things. So I've been out doing that. I'm also excited today because our SROs in our school will be recognized as #1 in the state. And there's a program this afternoon in Shalimar where we get to recognize all of them. And we also know how great they are, and particularly moving into our project of somewhat increased safety and all that. You know, we've had them before the big picture. And I'm very proud of that group of individuals who every day work to keep not only our students, but our employees safe. So I'm excited to recognize them with the others this afternoon. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Evanche. All right, colleagues, so we do have section 16. That'll be the wrap-up of public comment. But if you'll move down, we have several public hearings to conduct Monday night as well. 17.1, public hearing for adoption of revised school board policy 02-17 purchasing procedures, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 17.2, public hearing for adoption of new school board policy 11-30, use of service animals, presented by Mrs. Terry Schroeder, Program Director Student Services, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. And then 17.3, public hearing for adoption of a new job description for teacher on special assignment, career recruiter, CTE, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. And that wraps up the agenda here. Mr.
I have a
Attorney-
question
excuse-
about that on
excuse me.
public hearing. When we have
Yes, ma'am.
3,
Sure. Mhm.
we do them just like in succession?
Yes, ma'am.
Because usually we just tend to have one.
Right,
So at 6:15, we stop and do all of them, right?
And there'll be separate votes on each one.
Okay, all right.
Okay, we'll have public comment for each one in the event that some folks wish to speak to them.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Ryan?
Number 16, is that only for Monday night, or can people spend?
Well, we don't really have a rule on that, so I would say that it includes today. So, yes, sir, yes, sir. Now, I think, Mr. McKinnon, is that a 2-minute rule, or did we
Yes.
ever? All right, so we provide 2 minutes at the end.
All right. Well, Mr. Bryan, first thing, I thought that was very nice what you said to Dr. Kelly. I'll use some of my time. I've been in your shoes before, and I've tried to handle it the same way, so very nice. Couple of quick questions since we don't have much time. On 9.10, the question about breaking out that one item, was that reference to the admin/managerial resignation from employee ID 121311. I didn't quite catch that.
Mr. Destin, was that the particular item that you were speaking to?
Should a board member make such a motion? Yes.
Then it would be, okay, and does the public have access to that general/mutual release agreement, or do we have to do a public records request to see that?
Good
Well, it's
question.
under executive content, which is the very question we were asking about. Mr.
Okay.
McGinnis, is that one that's protected by?
No, it'll be public record.
Okay, so we can make a public records request. I know we probably won't see it before Monday night, but that's
Well,
fine.
that becomes the question, though. Is it a public record now, and since the fact that it's not been executed?
Yes.
All right. That
Okay.
answers your question directly.
That's fine, sir. Just
Okay.
want to know. And then on 9.8, I know that you mentioned the back pay issue is not a huge number. The former superintendent has publicly stated, and we can show you that on Facebook sometime, or I can email it to you, that she does feel she's entitled to legal fees being reimbursed. So I was just wondering, I guess that would not come out of your personnel funding. Where would those legal fees come out of if whoever makes the judgment that she gets repaid? I was just wondering if anybody knows that,
Yes, sir.
or
Let
should I
me-
come back
let
another
me-
time?
Let me direct that question two ways.
Mhm.
First of all, to our attorney, since that issue's been raised and apparently discussed publicly. And then perhaps we may call upon Ms. Scallon regarding such an answer. Or you may advise, since that's a disputed matter, I guess.
I mean, I can confirm that there has been a request made to reimburse her attorney's fees,
All
yes. It's still under legal review. I can't answer the question of which budget area were it
Okay.
to be paid. That'd be Ms. Scallon would have to make a suggestion.
Ms. Scallon, I guess the question is,
That's-
should that become a reality?
Sure. And I guess I can rephrase the question generically. If it were to be approved in such a situation, where would the money come from? That's really
Okay,
all I'm
I
asking.
understand. Mrs. Scallon?
And Mr. Chairman, let me clarify.
Sure.
This agenda item 9.8 does not include any recommendation to pay those legal fees.
Correct.
This is not part of this action.
All right. Ms. Scallon?
Okay, always in our budget, we have legal expenses estimated for each year. So within that budget, if there is some determination that the school district would need to pay attorney fees, it would come out of that line item. Now, if in the event that line item were exhausted, then I would come back to you as the board and ask you, make a recommendation of where to fund, that expenditure from.
Well, and so a follow-up question to that would be, legal costs that the school board or the school district incurs, do those costs come from the same line item, same area?
They're all going to come from the attorney fee line
Exactly.
because as an organization of our size, we always have to
Absolutely.
have a budget with an estimate for unforeseen, unanticipated things.
Right.
So in any year, you're going to have some additional funds there beyond what you actually know you're going to incur.
Yes, ma'am. And if I could just follow up on that and say, as every private business person knows, legal fees are just a cost of doing business. It's a reality. And of
Absolutely.
course, when we have a business this big, of over $400 million a year, we have legal costs. There's no question. That's the way. That's the reality. Any other questions about that particular item? Mr. Ryan?
So
does that
before
answer-
Ms. Scallon goes away, I just wanted to ask one last thing. Do any of those districts' legal expenditures get reimbursed by anything from the state?
Sometimes, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, they might be reimbursed by insurance, but I'm not sure.
Yes, it would depend on the incident, and if it
Coverage.
was determined that it was covered under omission and errors or any other area, then the insurance company would pay for that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. That answers some questions. Obviously, the reason I'm asking that is because, and you brought up this issue when we were talking about it earlier, sir, is that this was an action by the state. No one here has any control over it. There's nothing anybody that's in this room or in this county can do about it. That is just a fact. And, but we're going to be paying for it. The people in this county are the ones that are going to pay for it. So just wanted to make that point, and maybe I give you a little more insight into why we're doing what we're doing. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, Mr. Ryan. Okay, Mr. Attorney, does that cover all of our business for today?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chambers, you're good, your staff and everybody?
Yes, sir.
Colleagues, you all good? All right. Adjourned.